Hi, and welcome to this live reading from MisSpelled by TH Leatherman, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, My Brother's Keeper. I stepped around Chuck and put a hand on my brother's chest. Hey, big guy, let's take this down a notch. Middle of the morning, school in session, not the best time to get in a fight. I mean, you'll get bloodstains all over your favorite ugly shirt. Jared growled. Step aside, Evan, this is between Chuck and me. And if Coach Ballack saw you right now, does the bench really need your big ass warming it this Friday? I said. That kind of worked. My brother stopped and looked over the heads of the other students. At 6'5", it wasn't hard. He glanced up and down the hall. I prayed for a teacher to emerge from a nearby classroom. No joy. The other students weren't any help. No one even pulled out their cell phones to click it on vid. Jared was popular, and well, Chuck wasn't. No one was going to snitch on the football star. Coach ain't here, but Chucky the Chicky is stand aside, bro. He wants to tell me something. I can see it in his eyes. Jared grinned evilly. Bringing Mom into the argument wouldn't help. She was all about peace and love and the find a way to get along with your brother crap. I took a different tactic. I stepped next to Chuck and whispered into his ear. He wants you to take the first swing. That way no one can say he started it. Don't be this pansy's patsy. If I do nothing, he'll keep spilling my books and calling me stuff. Chuck glared at Jared. I've had it. I'm going to end it. Then he spoke to my idiot brother. Between the buildings? Jared rolled his neck. You got it, Chicky. Closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. Chuck kicked his spilled books out of the way and headed for the courtyard. Well, half-bro, Jared snarled at me. Looks like today's the day. Chicky gets to prove how much of a fairy he really is. Two of Jared's teammates, Will and Gary, peered on either side of him. I studied their faces. This was going to be worse than last time. They beat up Noah last month. Poor Noah had gotten suspended for it. Not this time. I stood up straight and looked my brother right in the eye and sighed like I'd given up. I get it. I understand what you're trying to teach here. First, it is impossible to underestimate you. Jared's head tilted in confusion as he tried to parse that, but I plowed on. And when you've pea-sized balls, you have to beat up other smaller guys to make yourself feel better. The half second of shock on Jared's face was worth it. I turned and ran. Sprinting up the hall, I dodged fellow students. This had happened before. I was faster than Jared and Gary. Will was another story. When he grabbed my shoulder, I didn't need to look. I twisted out of Will's grip. Sorry, Rosy Palms, I taunted. Use less oil next time you play with yourself. Will snarled and lunged. I sidestepped and left him grasping at air. Overextended, he went down. At the front doors, I slowed up a bit. By now, someone would have told the teacher something was up, which would help me not at all. Can't punish the star player. At that moment, being suspended for a couple of weeks didn't seem so bad, so I took a risk. I hit the metal door. Instead of busting through the next set, I stopped and slammed the door shut. Jared snaked an arm through. The heavy door caught his arm and part of his face. The combination thwack and crunch sound suggested something gave. It wasn't the door. I shoved, but Jared kept his arm in the door. He spit blood and bits of tooth at me. With Gary helping, Jared was getting the door open. It was a losing battle. I bolted out the second set of steel doors. A wave of heavy and humid Texas air hit me like a gut punch. I sprinted through the parking lot. Heavy breaths. Too close. No need to look. I ran with all I had. If I made it to the woods across from the school, they wouldn't follow. I ran into the street. The woods were so close. Freedom. Tires squealed, but nothing hit me. I jumped the ditch, took 2 steps, and hurdled the fence, but the top wire caught my foot. My face slammed into the mud, but at least I was over the fence. Got you now, fart brain, growled Gary. Dread ate at my gut. Will and Gary were climbing the fence. Jared was behind them. What the hell? They didn't follow. They never followed. Spit out the dirt and leaves and scrambled to my feet. Okay, maybe taking the heat off Chuck wasn't the best idea. Oh, crap. Oh, crap. Oh, crap. My lungs burned and my legs ached. Sweat trickled down my back. I needed to lose them. Son of an ass, I'm going to kill you, threatened Will. I believed him. They crashed through the underbrush. There was a stream downhill. The morning mist shrouded the woods in an eerie half-light. My feet slipped on pine needles. I risked a glance. They were back there, but I'd gained some breathing room. Something wet and prickly slapped my face. Pine tree. I put my arms up and ran. My arms took the worst of the assault. Water flew as the damp needles soaked my sleeves. It was thick today. If I could get enough ahead of them, I could lose them in the fog. Why had Jared and the Bumble twins followed me? They never had before. I was the target du jour. Today's menu, stump stomp. Pain shot through my ankle and I plunged down the hill, struggling to stay upright. I've got to get away. Anywhere is better than here. In the ravine, the mist was thicker. The creek sounded like breaking glass. Agony shot through my ankle as I ran. On the hill, Jared and his friends were gaining on me. Were they too close to lose them? What was I going to do at the bottom if I couldn't? Climbing the other side, they'd catch me for sure. Run along the stream bed? The white pine needles were treacherous, but rocks and mud in the stream would be worse. I heard them panting. They were gaining on me. This was it. Any second now, one of them would grab my shirt and yank me off my feet. I swallowed hard. Almost there. Sucking in a breath, I angled for the creek. Maybe getting wet would deter them. Yeah, right. But slippery for me was slippery for them too. Get away. Get away. I've got to get away. I reached the bottom. The stream was 6 feet across. I jumped. Pain exploded in the back of my head. In that instant, light outlined my body like I was passing through a window without breaking it. A tingling sensation hit every nerve. Fingernails, toes, the tip of my nose. The world ceased to exist. Chapter 2, Strange Strangers. I landed somewhere else. Pain lanced up my ankle. My ears popped like someone had used an ice pick on them. The mist was gone. The sun was higher. Late afternoon? The smell of pine was stronger. Otherwise, it looked a lot like the stream bed I'd just left. And then there were the people yelling and fighting. Some people with pointy ears and fancy armor. Elves swinging swords at a bunch of shorter green guys in leather. Goblins, maybe? An unbelievable amount of pressure built in my stomach. It was unlike any burp I'd ever had. It started in my shoes, went through my gut and out of my mouth like a cannon. Burp! It echoed off the walls of the ravine. The force of it knocked one of the warty green guys down. I wasn't aiming for him or anything. He just happened to be fighting an elf in front of me. All fighting stopped. All eyes turned to me. Excuse me, I said. The goblin I belched off his feet screamed and backpedaled. The other goblins shook in their boots. Liquid ran down their legs. Scrambling, the fallen goblin ran like a horde of rampaging monsters was after him. I checked. No monsters. But all the other goblins took off after him. They scurried up the other side of the ravine, leaving me and the elves to stare after them. Despite the seriousness of the situation, I was a little offended. I sniffed at my armpits. Nope, anti-stinky stuff was still anti-stink. Even more weird was that I could swear I saw a black cat at the top of the ravine, but I blinked and it was gone. 2 of the pointy-eared people I tried unsuccessfully to stop thinking of them as elves approached me. Their armor was a shiny blue-green color, except where it was marred with dirt or blood. The 2 people nearest me removed their helmets. They had sharp features. The guy had long red hair. The woman had blonde curls. They had slanted eyes with cat-like pupils. They didn't point their swords at me, but they didn't put them away either. As long as they didn't point them at me, being polite seemed like a good strategy. The guy opened his mouth and a weird bird warbling came out. Bird call? That couldn't be right. Shook my noggin to clear it, then tapped my ear to show I didn't understand. The guy scowled and made the same bird sounds again. I shook my head. Whoever these people were, they talked like a bunch of deranged robins. The blonde woman eyed me oddly, then twisted her head sideways like she was looking over my shoulder. Or at the side of my head? I touched the tops of my ears. They were all staring at them. Okay, awkward. The blonde woman looked like the head cheerleader from high school, short and athletic. I focused on keeping my gaze on those awesome leaf green peepers of hers. Getting caught staring elsewhere would not have made a good impression. It was hard, though, because she was achingly beautiful. Just having her attention on me caused my heart to race. She closed her eyes and rubbed her temples for a moment, then refocused on me. Human? Human? Okay, this was getting weirder and weirder. Still, they had pointy ears and odd-looking eyes, so I nodded. The elves glanced at each other, then spoke in their birdsong language, and now it was an entire flock of deranged robins. Great! They decided on something, and the woman approached me again. She pointed to her chest. Thesina. Thesina, I repeated, pointing to her. I pointed to my chest. Evan. She smiled and pointed to her red-haired companion, who scowled at me. Dericus. I repeated his name as well. Thesina swept her arm, indicating that I should follow them. Having no better options, I did as she asked, and my ankle chose that moment to remind me I'd recently been a klutz. I stumbled and groaned in pain. The blonde elf held a palm up. I stopped. She knelt and put her hands on my shin. Warmth spread through my foot. She stood up and I tested my ankle. The pain had vanished. I blinked. Wow, that's cool. We climbed out of the ravine. Everything was subtly different. I knew the woods around my school pretty well. I enjoyed hiking, and it was faster to go through the woods than to take the roads around. Jared didn't like the woods, so it was a win-win as far as I was concerned. But my brain kept having hiccups. The pine needles were longer. Where there's supposed to be a large tree, there wasn't one. Sometimes there were large rocks where there shouldn't be. Okay, not Texas, and maybe not Earth. Assuming the sun worked the same here, it was now late afternoon. There wasn't a trail that I could see. It didn't take long to go beyond the woods that I knew into terra incognita. Nothing looked familiar, and I realized I might not find my way back. Yeah, Toto, we definitely ain't in Texas no more. I said this because my cell phone was doing a great job imitating a brick. The trees thinned out. Then we were on a dirt road to an honest to King Arthur medieval castle rising out of a grove of large trees. And when I say large trees, I mean redwood-sized monster trees, which meant that the castle had to be frickin' huge. Moss and ivy climbed up the walls, and the stone showed lines where rainwater had marked paths down the sides. When we got closer, I saw more elves. Instead of armor, the men wore loose-fitting silk shirts and tights. The women wore dresses with stays and bodices. They were standing beside some trees. With a start, I realized the trees had cleverly hidden doors in them. These people were living inside the trees? If that wasn't odd enough, people jostled each other to get a look as we passed. Everyone stared at my ears. Behind us, I heard murmurs in that strange bird song they used as a language. I couldn't help but stare in awe as we walked through the well-worn road through this majestic forest village. Paths snaked away from the main road into the trees. At the castle, Derek has motioned to the soldiers to wait outside. While he did that, Thesina snagged a passing elf boy. He also stared at the amazing round-eared wonder until she snapped her fingers in his face. She chirped or tweeted something to him, and he ran off. Derek has led the way through some grand hallways filled with paintings of elves in fancy clothes, tapestries, and statues, to a set of huge ancient blue metal bound oak doors. The doors opened into a space bigger than the gymnasium at my high school. Stone columns carved to look like tree trunks that soared 30 feet into the air. Light shone through green leaf-shaped stained glass windows in the ceiling. The floor was covered in some sort of sturdy moss that obviously didn't mind being stepped on. The room absorbed sound so that it was quieter than the school library during finals week. We stopped about 20 feet from a regal blonde-haired elf woman sitting on a jewel-encrusted golden throne on a raised dais. She wore a green and gold dress with a fancy bodice and a simple gold circlet around her head. Thesina and Derek bowed low, so I copied them. Whoever she was, she must be important. A musical bird song issued from the older woman, and everyone stopped bowing. She smiled and stood. The silk dress was distracting, and my neck warmed. I swallowed hard as she sashayed down the steps to the moss-covered floor. She performed a slow circle around us, but her eyes never left mine. The impression was that she wanted to know more about me than my name and favorite ice cream flavor. She wanted the whole cone with all the toppings. The regal lady said a couple of things, which of course I didn't understand. Her voice was more like swallows than robins. That didn't keep me from wanting to do whatever she wanted and more. Finally, the woman licked her lips seductively and held her hand up, palm facing toward her. She slowly turned her palm around. Cupped there was a gorgeous red heart-shaped gemstone on a silver chain. She held it out to me. I was drawn to the gem. The deep red stone glittered and glowed with an inner light. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I reached for it. I wouldn't touch that if I were you, kid,